will come off and then we'll conversate. I was just telling everybody as I saw people floating around.
Okay, sounds
Hi, hello. Hello, hello. How are you all? Thriving in your courses, I know for sure. I'm putting that into the universe. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, especially on the last round of the semester. It's very, very exciting. Thanks for, this is an exciting moment in time. If you don't know, my name is Odette Marie Rodriguez. I'm the program coordinator here. So before we get started, I'm going to go over some things and then pass out the mic so you can hear from some of our wonderful Women's Studies students this semester. The Center for Women's Studies recognizes our collective responsibility to acknowledge our colonial history. Our campus sits on the unceded traditional lands of the Oneida Nation. We recognize that discussions of gender and other systemic issues cannot exist without acknowledging the extraordinary influence that Haudenosaunee women have had and have on feminist movements. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here together today, and join us in uncovering such truths in any and all public events. So I'm just going to announce a couple of upcoming things and then we'll get right into it. Today, at 5 p.m. in the Botsa room, there will be a positive affirmation and self-talk study break. If you put it into the universe, it shall become true. So get those passing grades. On Wednesday, in Alana, they will be at 1:30. They'll be hosting You Talk, We Listen. I know it is with Monique Lewis from the Counseling Center. And then, yes, snaps from Monique. And then next Wednesday here at the center at 2 p.m. we'll have our Finals Week study break, which is co-sponsored by Alana and LGBTQ initiatives as well. So please come out and take a break from your very busy studious lives because you deserve it. During the presentation and Q&A, please use microphones to ensure accessibility, and please make sure to clean up after yourselves. And if you can, please help stack chairs. My interns will very much appreciate it. Yes. So I am going to pass the mic off to Professor Hill, who's going to introduce some of our wonderful students.
Hello, I'm going to be here now. Bye. Okay, no. For those who don't know me, I'm Professor Hill. I've had the great opportunity of teaching 2 amazing sections of Intro to Women's Studies. Yeah, give them a shout out. This opportunity was absolutely amazing for a number of reasons. One, because I took that class in the very class that I taught it this semester. So it was super cool to be able to teach students in the class where I took this very same intro, not exactly the same content, but again, intro, nonetheless. So today, thank you all, students, staff, faculty, dates, if anybody brought a date along with them for the, show them how smart you are. But nonetheless, the classes did projects, semester-long projects, where they looked at a topic that they were very much interested in. There were teams, and there were 4 teams in each class. And today, I'm not doing anything other than hyping you all up for the amazingness that they produced. I will turn it over to our 2 MCs, Alex and Evelyn, who will kind of give you all an overview of what to expect. And we'll have a great time. We'll ask lots of questions, and we'll finish the semester off on a solid note. Thank you.
Hi, guys. I'm Evelyn. This is Alex.
I'm Alex.
Hi. So first of all, we're just going to talk a little bit about the 2 teams in each of our classes that aren't presenting today, just to give you a little insight on what they did. So first of all, in my class, Team Megan's & Co. Did an incredible research project on the history and meaning behind the word thick. And using their literature review, academic research, conversations with students, and a media analysis.
They were able to notice themes of anti-blackness, misogynoir, and body shaming within the language and conversations surrounding thickness and the word thick in popular culture today. And they were able to present their findings in 3 really interesting art forms. One poem that was really, really moving to me, a poster using drawing and collage, and then lastly a podcast with their conversations that they had with other students. The second team that isn't presenting is Team Cage. We looked at the experience of women and other underrepresented gender and racial identities in STEM classrooms specifically, knowing that there has been a problem with underrepresentation in the STEM field. We did an extended literature review to kind of determine the status of exclusive classrooms in the history of STEM, and then we were able to collect student testimonials about the current state of the problem. And using that research and testimonials, we basically wanted to bring to light students' experiences so we can understand kind of what the status of exclusion is today and also who remains underrepresented. And we were able to kind of collect our research and testimonials into a booklet with some artwork, and that'll probably be somewhere in the Women's Studies Center for you guys to look at eventually.
Okay, so one of the projects that will not be presenting today was in my class was put on by the Women's Studies Warriors. Their presentation was a reenactment of a gender reveal party to illuminate the shortcomings and limitations of the gender binary in society and how it affects child development. Ultimately, this binary and the use of it further reinforces oppressive power structures that already exist in society, and they explored and analyzed why that is and how that is perceived in society. The second project that will not be presenting today was by the Women's Study Wallabies. They created an online blog for members of the Colgate community to post experiences of the sexism they face on a daily basis here on campus. From these experiences, the Wallabies analyzed who posted about their experiences, where these experiences most frequently occurred, who caused these experiences, and whose narratives were left out of these experiences and why. From here, they investigated what sexism means on Colgate's campus and how we can work towards creating a more honest community that is motivated towards defeating sexism here and all over the world.
Yeah, awesome. So the first group that's going to be presenting today is Team Hills Angels, and they basically they produced a radio show on the topic of love in modern music, and they took music from 5 different genres: rap, indie, pop, country, and R&B, and music from 2 different artists in each genre, and were able to analyze the song lyrics, the themes that were brought up in the music, and using material from our curriculum, they were able to kind of provide commentary on how love can differ by genre and how certain depictions can be really problematic on the topic of love.
The second group to present today are the Coasters. The Coasters decided to investigate the topic of Black fetishization as manifested through the use of social media. They created an Instagram account to explore and demonstrate how Black bodies have become fetishized in a way that allows white women to continue to benefit the inherent power and privilege they possess, while also commodifying Black culture and bodies. Their presentation also addresses various interlocking systems of oppression that occur in our society, including race, gender, and power.
The third team, Team Girl Gang, performed research on sex education nationwide and found that there was no standardized queer-friendly sex education program. And so with that information in mind, they kind of created their own and decided on course content, and will basically be showing you guys a skit of how the enactment of their queer-friendly sex ed program is going to look, and addressing both the course content and the classroom dynamic that they would like to uphold.
And finally, the final group to present is the Wandering Wallabies. The Wandering Wallabies decided to explore gender violence at Colgate. The team used Colgate's archives to investigate gender violence of the past, and using a survey, evaluated in what systems students witness gender violence today on campus. The team uses photo voice to compare and contrast gender violence from then and now.
Let's give it up for our teams.
Hi everybody, we're Hills Angels. Like Evelyn said, our presentation looked at love and how love songs in modern day music portray gender stereotypes and gender roles. Yeah. Okay, so our process for coming up with our project is, so I host a radio show every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m., so you should tune in. And my show takes a different four-letter word each week that represents a taboo in society, and I explore it through different genres of music. So we decided to try to play along with the theme of my show, and so that's why we chose the idea of love to go through. And so we did a lot of research and chose 5 different genres that we thought would best be portrayed through music. And then we last week did a recording of our show, and later on we will play part of the recording for you. So one theory that kind of formed the base of our ideas and our research is social constructs, which is basically the idea that everything is created and upheld by society, and that shapes the way we behave and interact with people. And this kind of plays into hegemony, which is the idea that the people in power in the community are the ones that create the rules, and everyone else has to kind of go along with it, and that's how pressure is put on people to conform. And then going along with this, too, is heteronormativity and heteropatriarchy, which is the idea that the normally cis straight white men are the ones who create these roles because they're the ones who hold power in society. And so everyone who does not fit this are kind of pushed to just go along with these. So through these ideas, we looked at how gender, love, relationships, power dynamics, and gender roles are all influenced by society. And through these social constructs, everyone is pressured to conform. So then we looked at the music and the media and how these uphold the traditional gender roles that are pushed on us. Yeah, so we covered multiple songs of multiple genres, like you heard, including pop, hip-hop, R&B and soul, country, and alternative. And the songs we covered were 1980s horror film, 1950, Gold Digger, Bardia Cardi, Cheerleader, Like a Girl, Country Girl, Follow Your Arrow, I Feel It Coming, and If I Were a Boy. Okay, so we're gonna play a clip from our show. The song you just heard was a 1980s horror film by Wallows, which Evie picked out. So why did you pick out this song?
Yeah, so I chose the song because I thought it was a really good example of an indie or alternative song. And this band's out of LA, and there's a lot of Jamie Love songs about women, like this one. But I chose this in particular because I think it really displays the concept of heteronormativity very well, because the lead singer of the band automatically assumes that the woman Zoe's interested in is also straight. And at the end of the song, Zoe tells the singer that Zoe's a lesbian. And so this just really speaks to how people in society are so like heteronormative and really tend not to like ask people or assume that like people aren't like what they think. So I also chose this because I think it shows how men really sexualize women and look at them in a manner that really only has to do like with that light, and like that women are submissive, because the entire time like throughout the song the singer didn't ask the woman Zoe was with like what her opinion on the situation was. We kind of just assumed that Zoe was interested in him and was interested in doing what Zoe wanted to.
All right, so then the next song that we're going to play is 1950 by King Princess, and it's another song that Evie chose, so I'm going to let her explain why she chose the song, and then I have a little bit of a personal comment to go along with that.
Yeah, so King Princess is a really interesting artist to feature because Zoe is genderqueer and gay. So something you'll hear while listening to this song is that it's about a queer relationship, and I thought it was important to play on the show because it's not really something you hear on the radio a lot, or a topic that people really talk about like in popular media. So this song really examines the different barriers that queer people have to navigate in their relationships and with society. An important line to look out for is when Zoe sings, "It's so cold that your stare's about to kill me," which is when she's referencing the experience of being unable to interact with Zoe's lover in public. Because in many societies and cultures around the world, that isn't safe for people, and that's something we all should recognize. But I would also like to point out that King Princess, as an artist, is in a uniquely privileged situation because Zoe is white and comes from a very wealthy and prestigious family, and she also lives in the U.S. and that affords Zoe a lot of leeway that other people don't have and gives Zoe a platform to talk about a queer relationship.
Yeah, and so I really like the song 1950 because as an openly gay female, I dealt with a lot growing up listening to songs that were only about love between a man and a woman, and at that time it was a very confusing thing for me. And then when I finally did enter into a relationship that was homosexual, it was almost something embarrassing, and I didn't want to tell people, and I wanted to hide it. And so I literally was playing 1950 for 7 months of last semester because I was too ashamed to tell anyone about it. But at the same time, I listened to the song all the time because I related so much to it. So I do think that it's really good that King Princess provides that representation that a lot of other songs, especially ones on the radio, don't provide for a lot of people.
Just as reference, we're using Zoe instead of gender pronouns, so she, he is.
Yeah, and we wanted to explain why we chose our songs and how it fit into our version of love. So we chose our songs that we thought were interesting in featuring a relationship between two or more people that referred to a desirable nature in the song, regardless of gender or sexual identity. Through our research, we came to the realization that most of these songs would fall into a category of more lust than actual love. We also used the concept of self-love in our project and used songs that had the artist singing about themselves in a very loving or supportive way. So in our project, we loosely defined it as an intense feeling of deep affection.
So our expectations for this project is that a lot of the songs that we were looking at would contain language that really sexualized women and reinforced gender roles, and that this language would be pretty even across all the genres we looked at, and then maybe feature a little heavier in rap and R&B genres. And unfortunately, this turned out to be pretty accurate. I think that's not a surprise for anyone, and especially because we were looking at love songs, a lot of the reflections of gender norms are very stereotypical, especially in the relationships. So one example of this is in Cheerleader by Ami, where Zoe sings that this girl is always right there when Zoe needs her. And so this really portrays an image of a girl waiting on Ami, the artist, and doing anything that Zoe needs. And as we just heard in the recording in the song 1980s Horror Film, the singer finds out that the woman Zoe's singing about is a lesbian, but only at the end of the song. And this is important because the placement of this line, one, reflects that the singer never thought to consider that the woman in the song isn't straight. And it also kind of is used as a punchline to the anecdote of this funny little incident. And this use of it as a punchline reflects the homophobia that is still really present in a lot of these industries and how people still aren't accepting of things outside the traditional realm when it comes to love. However, in songs like 1950 by King Princess, we see a queer relationship that's discussed in very popular media, and that's something that's definitely changed over time. So that was really cool to see. And in Lizzo's song, Like a Girl, so as a line that says, if you feel like a girl, then you feel like a girl. And so that really speaks how gender norms are really changing and people who may not have been born traditionally female identify as female, and that's being slowly more accepted. And we also found that songs by female identifying artists fit into the stereotypical canon of gender role in love less than ones by male artists. Like in Casey Musgrave's song, Follow Your Arrow, she talks about like kissing boys or kissing girls and doing whatever you want to do and like making that decision for yourself instead of doing what society thinks you should. However, we did find that throughout all of these genres, there was a lot of negative and objectifying representations of women, and that was also like more prominent in rap and R&B, but also in the country genre with the song "Country Girl Shake It For Me." I don't know if anyone's heard it, but it's something. Yeah, and overall, throughout all of the genres, there was a portrayal of women as very submissive to men, particularly in that like traditional heterosexual relationship that goes along with like the gender roles that we were looking at.
Yeah, so we learned throughout this project that we can embody the feminist movement and project by acknowledging the music that we're listening to and understanding the messages behind it and acting in a way that is consistent with the feminist project and the messages behind the music. So whether that be not listening to certain artists or demanding more from certain artists, yeah, that's basically it.
Go back up. Click next.
Okay, so our project is titled My Body Is Not Your Fetish, and we looked at the fetishization of black women's bodies in the media.
Yeah, so our project focused on black fetishization and specifically how black female bodies are fetishized. For example, how black women are constantly sexualized in the media. And we also looked at the many cases where white women will change certain features of themselves in order to look like black women.
And so one of the issues we looked at is beauty standards. And we found that black women are objectified for their features, but yet their features are also, they become manifested white women that want black features. And this demonstrates how white women are benefiting from their inherent power and privilege, while also taking advantage of not being criticized for these same black features. And this has a lot of colonial roots as well, because in the past, black bodies and their features were kind of seen as less than and demonized as barbaric. But now they've kind of shifted towards being something that people want and lust after.
Yeah, so media obviously plays a really big role in how people are expressed nowadays, and as media advances, like they're white. So basically, white people are. It shows. Sorry. The objectification of black women in the media is shown. Wait. Oh, I'm not this one. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so the objectification of black women in the media is when black women are hyper-surveilled for their features, such as how they dress, how they wear their hair. For example, a black woman wearing a tight dress is more likely to be criticized for trying to appear sexy than a white woman wearing the same dress.
Okay, so the role of capitalism is like a pretty big part in the media nowadays because white people are benefiting from commodifying black properties, like they were talking about how white people are trying to have black features and they're benefiting it while benefiting from their privilege of still being white, while black people are not benefiting from anything here.
So our main argument is that in the 21st century, there's been this transition in beauty standards, which has led to the fetishization and objectification of black bodies. Black culture has become seen as a marketable object of white interest in which capitalists profit. And while both men and women are contributing to this objectification of black bodies, white women in particular are accountable because they tend to criticize black bodies while at the same time adopting typically black features and profiting off of it.
So for our research project, we chose to create an Instagram page, and we chose Instagram because it was a way to publicly show the objectification and the fetishization of black bodies. We kept our page public in order for people who found it to comment and create a dialogue on it. We also chose an Instagram page because the media is often one of the main perpetrators of the objectification of black bodies, so we decided to use it kind of against itself in order to show this injustice.
So one of the things that we created is what we call the staircase of fetishization, objectification, and violence. So as we go up the staircase, you'll see that it gets progressively worse, which is also highlighted through the deeper shades of red. So like, for example, when we address the transracial, that is kind of like at the top of the staircase because of how bad it is.
So we're now going to show some examples of the posts that we put on our Instagram page. So this is the first one. Like Becca said, it's at the bottom of the staircase, and it shows the objectification of black bodies. So this is Patrice Brown, who is an elementary school teacher in Atlanta, and she posted these pictures on her Instagram, and the picture on the left gained a lot of attention because people were saying that that kind of outfit was too much or too inappropriate for the classroom, even though it was in line with the school's dress code. People were commenting saying that that type of attire was more meant for the club than the classroom. And throughout all these comments, she gained the hashtag of #TeacherBay. And this is just a prime example of the objectification of black bodies, because while many people were shaming her for her attire, there were also a lot of comments addressing the fact that if she were a different race or had a different body type, she would not have gotten this same reaction.
Okay, so Serena Williams has been characterized in the media a lot as being like a crazy black woman from her matches on the tennis court. But this particular incident was in the 2018 French Open, where she was criticized for wearing a black catsuit, and it was deemed as inappropriate and actually banned from the tournament. And all she wanted to do by wearing this outfit was to show like she had just had a really tough pregnancy, and she actually wanted to wear it to protect her C-section scars from like opening during her match, so she actually had to wear it, but yet she was still criticized, and it just shows how black women are put up to this double standard in society and the media.
So next we have what is called the blackfish. Blackfishing is a recently coined term that's been popularized as what happens when somebody is accused of pretending to be black or another race by taking on typically black hairstyles or wearing makeup, or in some drastic cases undergoing surgery. So it went viral on Twitter when a thread called out to post all of the white girls cosplaying as black girls on Instagram. So a lot of influencers and celebrities ended up getting called out, notably influencer Emma Hallberg and Ariana Grande, when these photos from years prior were posted showing clear discrepancies in their skin color. So there's so many issues here, and we know that violence can take on many forms. To quote an excerpt from the caption on this original post, those engaging in blackfishing have often been seen to cherry-pick aesthetics that they see as being stereotypically associated with black women and capitalizing on these to land lucrative sponsorship deals that women of color may not otherwise have access to. Some influencers have been accused of manipulating their photographs or undergoing plastic surgery to change the appearance of their features so they appear to have fuller lips and curvier figures. Critics of the trend describe it as a form of cultural appropriation, whereby elements of a minority culture are adopted by those in a more dominant culture without crediting the origin, leaving members of the minority culture feeling oppressed and marginalized. The people who have been labeled as blackfish strongly deny that this is their intention. So what makes the blackfish so unique is that they don't claim to be black. When Emma Hallberg got called out, she said that she has never identified as anything other than white and that she just tans very easily. However, this is really problematic because you see a lot of these girls who don't address it and they benefit off of adopting like black or the racially ambiguous aesthetic, and they profit off of it, and this manifests like into violence, and they still benefit from their white privilege.
And as you can see, Kylie Jenner has enlarged her lips a lot over the years, and despite the criticism she's received from a lot of celebrities, she continues to profit from commodifying black features. And she has a cosmetic label called Kylie's Cosmetics, and she has sold over $630 million worth of makeup. So she realizes that by being close to black culture, but not actually being black, she can make a profit.
So this is Rachel Dolezal, and she represents kind of the final step past blackfishing, which is that she actually pretends that she's black in real life. So you can see on the left, she was born to 2 white parents in Montana, and this is what she looked like growing up. But she claimed that she's always felt kind of blackness inside of her, whatever that means. And she ended up going to Howard University, which is predominantly black. And she sued the school unsuccessfully for discriminating against her because she was white. Yeah, she's kind of crazy, but so eventually she ended up kind of just adopting this lifestyle that she was pretending that she was black, and eventually kind of altered her hair and changed her skin tone artificially with product, and basically started telling people she was black, and rose to become a black activist and author, and eventually was named the president of the Spokane chapter of the NAACP. And then she made a false claim that she was threatened for her race. And when it was investigated, they found that it was false, and it led people to investigate her other claims because they found a lot of inconsistencies in her stories. And they found her real parents who said that she was not black, and gave her birth certificate and a lot of other proof. So she ended up resigning from the NAACP, but she maintains that she's black still, which doesn't make a lot of sense. She claims that she's transracial and tells everybody that she's unapologetically black.
So we received a wide variety of comments on our Instagram, and we chose to put this one on our PowerPoint because since we tagged Kylie Jenner in the picture, we had a Kylie Jenner fan comment back defending her, saying that her skin is naturally darker because she's Armenian, so it's not cultural appropriation. And she told a Colgate student to educate herself. And then, and everyone, like 2 people responded who go to Colgate, and they proved her wrong, and she didn't respond after that.
We're also talking about in the picture about Kylie Jenner's lips, like her skin wasn't even, you weren't even talking about her changing her skin color, so that comment also was just so relevant.
So the continued exploitation of black bodies, particularly black females, is rooted in colonial imperialist frameworks, and it's maintained through historical reproductive control and hypersexualization. To quote I.D. Montague, the parading of the nude body of Sarah Baartman by the British colonizers led England and France to racially categorize her as subhuman. Her black body was viewed as something that could be violated, exploited, destructed, penetrated, and subjugated to various inhumane conditions. Centuries later, these interlocking systems of oppression are still at work, and it manifests itself in the form of misogynoir. We're in this really strange time now where you have to reconcile living in an anti-black society that also fetishizes and profits off of black bodies. And black bodies have historically always been considered like this ultimate other. It's in fact what gives white people their own sense of identity. And now we're at this question of what it means to desire the other or to to reduce blackness to this exotic other, and what it means when one's natural features is seen as beautiful on a body that is not their own, but is seen as bad on their own body. And then that's why when considering feminist work is active work. Feminist work is anti-racist work. And to do feminist work is to speak out against the system that values one particular body over another body.
So our beliefs prior to our research, we really didn't understand the extent that people go to get these black features, or white people go to get black features, and how much black bodies are fetishized within the media. And this also goes back to the role of capitalism within this topic, and it was expressed in our Instagram.
And we also didn't realize the extensive influence that the media has on beauty standards, and how those same double standards that they impose can affect Black women and women of color in particular.
Just like
Hi, so we're Girl Gang, and to start off our presentation, we wanted to actually hear from all of you guys. So we're gonna ask a few questions. Please answer them. Okay. So the first question, based on your experience with sexual education, what do you think is the most important thing to know about sex?
Consent.
Okay, she said consent. I'll just repeat.
How to not get pregnant.
How to not get pregnant.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. There's no wrong answer. Two more.
How not get STD.
How to not get STDs. Okay. All right. And then the next question is, if I were to describe or tell you about a scenario of two individuals having sex, what would come to mind?
straight people.
Okay, straight people.
Yeah, a man and a woman.
Man and a woman.
Penis and vagina.
Penis and vagina. Okay. Sweet.
Awesome. So thank you all for sharing. After we conducted a lot of research, we found that sex ed tends to be catered towards heteronormativity, which was definitely not surprising. But we also found that there has been a movement towards inclusion of queer bodies. But there's still a lot of work to be done, because in the curriculum that we found that did try to include queerness, there was still inclusion of a lot of people, such as just being catered towards gay men. So that obviously leaves out women or other non-gender conforming individuals, or it required queer students to take sex education courses on their own time, such as online, outside of the classroom. So it's definitely still othering queerness and not centering that.
Yeah, so with our research, we didn't find any specific curriculum that catered to all of these things. So we came up with kind of our own ideal sex ed curriculum that used gender neutral language and then was centered around queerness.
So we invite you all to watch an enactment of us trying to demonstrate the ideal sex ed class that is centered around queerness and uses gender neutral language. We decided to do a skit in order to give a lifelike example of an inclusive sex education class that shows the language that might be used and what the responses some students might give.
So welcome class. My name is Professor Gladstone, and I'm going to be your sex ed professor this year. So I'm excited for this class. Before we begin, there's a few things that I like to go over with all of my classes. It's very important to me to make sure that this is a very safe space for all of us, myself and you guys included. That's one example. I just said you guys. I'm not going to say that. When we're all going to try not to say guys in this class. Instead, we're going to refer to each other as folks or class, or if you guys, when you folks are talking to each other, you're going to use a different pronoun. So we're going to use the neutral pronoun Zoe in this class. So that being said, if I'm referring to Gabby, for example, I'm going to either say Gabby or Zoe whenever I'm talking about Gabby. We're doing this because it's important to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, like I said, and also instead of asking people to share their pronouns, some people might not be super comfortable doing that, so we're just going to use neutral on for everyone. Does that make sense? Yes, Lauren?
I don't really understand like why that's necessary. Like I feel like it's pretty obvious that like we're all girls. Like you can tell like you have like long hair, like you can just like look at someone, and I feel like it's like kind of clear. So I don't really understand why like, that's necessary.
I actually think it makes a lot of sense because I don't think it's safe to assume someone's gender based on like what they're wearing or what they look like or how someone behaves.
Really well said, Anne. Yes, I agree with what Anne said on that point because while it is easier for some people to assume gender based on appearance, it's not what we want to do because that can be incorrect and we want to make sure everyone feels comfortable. So it's just a lot easier to use a neutral pronoun just to make sure it's a nice safe space. We're going to try to do it. It will take a little time, Lauren, but I think you'll get the hang of it. All right, everybody on board before we start? Perfect. All right, so before we start talking about all the content, these are a few things on the board that we will eventually cover throughout the rest of the year, whether or not we'll get to them today. But what I want to ask you, class, is what you think the most important thing is about sex before we start talking about it. Just right at the top of your head. We'll get a chance. Yeah.
I think definitely just how to prevent pregnancy.
I think it's important to talk about queer individuals instead of just sex between two heterosexual people.
I think it's important if you're talking about sex that you want to have sex if you're gonna have it, so consent.
Wonderful. All right. All of your responses are correct. But they do kind of have different meanings to them. So what Anne was saying about talking about sex between queer individuals and not just heterosexual people is very important, and that's what we're going to be focusing on a lot in this class, making sure that we're including every single person in all genders. So Lauren's point about pregnancy, yes, that is definitely something that we will cover, but it's not going to be a big thing that we cover considering it only applies to a very small amount of people. It only applies to two heterosexual people engaging in the sexual act. And consent, Gabby, wonderful, on the board. We will be talking about that as well. So I want to kind of go back just to Anne's point about what she was saying was important about talking about queer individuals. So that's something that we will be definitely focusing on. My next question is kind of going to lead into that as well. Understanding the types of sex, how sex can be between multiple people, how it can be between all different types of people, and what that means to everyone. Sound good? All right, so now I'm going to ask you one more question. If I were to tell you a scenario of two people having sex, what would come to mind? You take a few seconds to think.
I mean, people usually think of sex like penis and vagina. So can sex also happen like with people that don't have it?
I feel like definitely not. Like not only can you not count, like you can't get pregnant, but you can't count like oral sex as real sex. Like that's what the third base.
No, but it's not a game. Like you're not trying to win something. Can't sex just be whatever you make it or whatever you want it to be? If you have like a great relationship with someone, if you communicate and share trust, and no matter like what the other person's sex is, then anything can be sex, and it's still considered having sex.
All right. First of all, that was a wonderful dialogue between all three of you. I'm really proud of that. So Gabby, you brought up a very important point, and I think Anne kind of answered that the most in the best way, just because it isn't a game. Sex is definitely whatever you make of it. Like I said, it doesn't have to be just between a man and a woman. That's just one type of sex, but there are all different types of sex. Oral sex could be considered sex depending on if you and your partner agree that that's what constitutes as it. It is really whatever you make of it. But being comfortable and having consent and feeling trust and love with your partner is very important, and that's what we really want to focus on in this class. So I think that concludes our class for today, but really great points to think on. For the remainder of our next class periods, I really want all of you guys, all of you folks, see, we're gonna help each other out. I want all of you folks to really continue doing that dialogue that you're doing. All of your points are valid, but when Gabby asks a question and then both of Lauren and Anne respond back and forth, that's what I want to see. I want to see a great dialogue between all of you guys, all of you folks, because this is very important in this class. All right, so next week. Okay. So that's it.
Okay. So before we say anything, what are some things that you all noticed about our ideal sex education classroom? Like, for example, the language that we use, what our different characters might be trying to represent, the message that we were trying to convey, etc.
Even when like some students would say something that was a little off, like the professor Haley was really responsive and receptive, and like was kind of like, yeah, and like we'll moving towards a positive direction always. Very
high value placed on patriarchy. So real sex is only sex of a particular type of penetration.
I think your character represented someone who wasn't really well educated about genders. I like how that, like, despite your character being like not super well educated, nobody was like really attacking her. They were just kind of trying more to like educate her.
It was more of a dialogue instead of just a lecture.
Yeah, all great points.
All right, so I, as you probably could tell, was the teacher. And so what I was trying to convey as the role of the teacher was like a lot of, some of you guys are just, some of you, that's what I was about to talk about. But some people were talking about how I was trying to make the dialogue and not really attacking Lauren, even when she was saying things that might not come off that great, but rather just like focusing on educating people and validating their points, but then also showing which ones are kind of better to talk about. So as you probably could tell, I struggled a little bit in the performance with saying guys a lot, and that was actually originally, like in the beginning, I wanted to talk about how we aren't going to say that, and also when we're using the pronoun zo, kind of make it similar to our own women's studies class and what we've learned there about language. But at the same time, when I like said it, it got on my mind, and it's just something that is so natural for me to say guys when I'm referring to a group of people regardless of their gender. So just like kind of inadvertently became an example of how it is very challenging, even if you are educated about like the correct language to use to break out of your habit. So just like continuing to work on that is something that I personally am going to do, like outside of the character as a real person. So yeah, I was trying to explain that a little.
And you all were pretty spot on with my character. I was trying to represent someone with just like a narrow-minded view, like maybe someone that has never taken a women's and gender studies class and didn't understand the importance of why you need to use gender-neutral language.
My role was the woke student, so I kind of knew the difference between sex and gender and like what sex should look like, and was just very aware of all that.
Yeah, and then my character didn't necessarily know much, but also had an open mind and was able to like participate in the dialogue. Okay, so then some other things that we were gonna cover in our sex ed curriculum if we like actually did it, if it wasn't just a skit. Things we talked about were like drugs and alcohol and how that would play into sex, masturbation, consent.
It was all like written on the board, which you can't see in the video. But also, yeah. Oh, like contraception. I think that was about it. But just like a lot of things that some people in the audience were saying in the beginning when I asked about sex ed, like what was the most important thing. A lot of the things you all said.
And then our project relates to the Feminist Project because it's contributing to a movement for equality of all bodies. And we assume that queer students would be included in sex education programs from the beginning, and our research kind of confirmed that. and then showed that when it is, it's just like one side and kind of considered an other. So then our project was looking at like what society considers other and kind of just like the term like queerness, like what that is conceptualized as.
Yeah, and sex ed is more important than people might think, and there's not a lot of emphasis put on it in schools and the necessary changes that it needs.
So we also found an article that talked about the increased suicide and depression rates of queer students in schools, and we really feel like if there was more of an emphasis placed on not just inclusion, but actually the centering of queerness, not just a mere toleration of queerness and sex education programs and just other school curriculum, that this would really change. And from our project, we want everyone to take away that this is what we think an ideal sex education curriculum will look like, but this is not the case because we haven't found any actual curriculum that matches our ideal version. So there definitely just needs to be a lot more emphasis placed on this manner and revising sex education programs around the world.
We're very trapped.
Hi. We require participation as well, so just a warning. I'm going to pass out some flyers that go along with our presentation. There's not enough because I like trees, so please share.
Hi guys. So we're gonna start by introducing ourselves. I'm Ben.
I'm Kelsey.
I'm Dash.
I'm Sydney.
And we were really intending to explore gendered violence at Colgate. We began by looking at the archives in order to gain some historical context about the subject, picking a specific moment to really target what gender violence looked like and how it manifested at Colgate during the mid-20th century, and then contrasting that and comparing it with gender violence today at Colgate.
Oh gosh.
So in order to do that, we put out a survey. We sent it out and got about 50 responses. And we asked these 6 questions. Have you ever heard the term gendered violence? If so, where and in what context? Do you believe gendered violence is present at Colgate according to our definition, which is harm or oppression inflicted on a group or an individual based on their gender identity, which is disproportionate to other groups or individuals? Then in what spaces have you witnessed gendered violence most commonly on campus? What system, in your opinion, perpetuates gendered violence to the utmost degree, and please explain why? So you'll see the disclaimer at the bottom of the screen here, but that's really just intending to say that we have a reach that only goes so far, and we weren't capable of really getting a sample size that was totally inclusive of the whole campus, as we really only had access to the people that we had access to. So our survey can't really be said to be some broad categorization of what gender violence looks like at Colgate, but it was a way of acquiring knowledge to the best that we could. So with that being said, these were some of the main takeaways in the statistics. Only 26 out of 50, a little bit above half of the people who responded had heard of the term gendered violence. And most of the people who had heard of it had learned it in academic context. Goes to show that it's not really a common term at the campus, at least among our sample size. Next, that students, once given the definition, did see it on campus. 41 out of 50 people believe that gender violence is present at Colgate. Only 8 said that they do not believe it's present. And the spaces and systems in which gender violence manifests most commonly were mentioned: fraternity houses, residence halls, non-Greek social spaces, classrooms, and then systems, rape culture, Greek life, administration, and bin shrinking culture. So next, we really evaluate these spaces. But here are some visual takeaways from our survey. Yes. So yeah, here are just the visual takeaways from our survey.
So for our mode of representation, we decided to use photo voice. And 2 really important things we got from our research. One, we looked at a study by a female student at the University of Iowa who created a photo voice project in response to a rape and murder of one of her fellow classmates. And what she did was use woman as muse archetype, which means she put herself in that photo. And so we kind of expanded that and used ourselves as kind of photographer as muse archetype. And what that does is put basically ourselves in the photo that are kind of uncomfortable, really tough subjects to kind of wrap your head around. And hopefully that will make the audience more comfortable to kind of address these subjects. So that's what you'll see in the photos. And then secondly, the show mnemonic we got from a study done at a 4-year university. It was again photo voice, but it was about cigarettes, so it was a health issue. But they used this showed analysis to kind of analyze these photos on a deeper level. That's also in the back of your handout. And those questions are: what do you see here? What is really happening here? How does this relate to our lives? Why does this problem exist? How can we be empowered by this? And what can we do about it? And then Dash is going to explain what we found in the archives.
So as a group, we wanted to find a moment in history that we could kind of use as a touch point for contrasting Colgate then and now in terms of gendered violence. And we picked the time in which Helen Craven Muse, the first official co-ed student, was on Colgate in the 50s. And oftentimes the story is painted very narrowly. It's like she's having a great time and was welcomed in, but there's a lot of gendered violence and sort of uneasiness to unpack there with her story that we wanted to dig into in the archives. So using photos of her on campus as a touch point, we placed ourselves in kind of roles of those photos to force ourselves to reflect about our own positions and our own ways we can impact gender violence, and also how it expresses how gendered violence appears on the Colgate campus in various ways. So we begin with administration.
So we're actually going to do one photo. We're going to use the show analysis together, but that's the second photo. So this one was to represent administration. This photo, we paid a lot of attention to the captions of photos, and that's kind of where you saw this like kind of violently sexist language. And this photo was basically captioned like, Helen makes studies of classics like super fun for male students, which is just, that's a bummer to hear that. And so I recreated this photo, and what I did was kind of play with, one, the amount of people in the room. I played with, obviously, the position of the student in the room. Also, the body language. My head is down, hair kind of covering your face, kind of implying silence. And then here's a picture of it, a little bigger. And then, our second one is Greek life. And we do encourage, while we analyze this, we obviously use ourselves as archetypes, but when you look at this, try to just think of us as bodies, whatever you know about like our own gender identities or history. We kind of just wanted to represent any body, so any gender, any identity.
Yeah, we don't claim to fully understand all of these issues we're portraying, but we wanted to represent it visually. So this is Greek life, and using the picture on the left is Helen Craven Muse being, I think the caption was being showed like the grand Colgate traditions by like the men of Colgate. And we just got a really, the way she's framed in that photo gave a super uncomfortable energy and everything, and the way it was, the language and all of the captions, just, we wanted to focus on that. And we attached that to that image of Greek life, which we recreated ourselves. And using the show mnemonic, we wanted to put it to you guys, to use it to reflect on what you, so beginning with S, does anybody want to start off with what they see here? It's on the back of your sheet, by the way. The whole show.
I'm gonna run along with this.
The first thing I see is like a girl who, or presenting as a girl, is alone and is walking up to her frat house with like two guys who are like blocking her from entering.
I think there's like an imbalance in power with there being two guys and one girl.
The body language of all the people kind of show that the one at the forefront is like nervous or scared, and then the two people at the back are like kind of in power here with their hands up, like looking like they're questioning her.
There's also a power dynamic because it's a female presenting student going into a space that isn't her own.
The way the picture's angled, looks like the males are positioned higher than her, essentially like reinstating or their dominance over the space and over her entering that space.
I think you guys already got to the second one, which is what is really happening here. But let's go to the third, which is how does this relate to our lives?
To me, it just connects to gatekeeping. Like they're holding the door, and depending upon what the rest of the other side of that image looks like, you might get in, you might not.
Greek life is really prevalent on this campus, so this power dynamic that's shown in the picture is definitely present here at Colgate.
Also going off Professor Hill's point, like even when you do get in to the doors, like how there's still that power dynamic once you enter, and how it's not the female space, how that affects kind of like what they can do in that space.
All right. What about why does this problem exist? I think we already started to get to it a little.
I think one of the reasons that this problem exists is that a lot of the social spaces and social activities on our campus are male dominated, and so oftentimes that feels very exclusionary towards female presenting students, and can also like make students in these spaces feel very uncomfortable.
All right, then lastly, they kind of go together, but how can we be empowered by this and what can we do about it?
Create spaces where any gender can host, or any gender can own the space and control their space and make it comfortable for them.
Abolish Greek life. Even within Greek life, I think it's a very outdated and sexist rule that only fraternities can host parties and not sororities, so fixing that.
Even to add, like, the system is a binary, like, if it was non-binary.
I was just gonna say, like create more spaces that aren't exclusionary, so like have like the map host stuff like that, and like do more stuff like that.
All right, great work, everybody. You guys are epic at show analysis.
So on the right, for binge drinking culture, we use a photo from the archives of a program cover for Colgate's 1954 Winter Carnival. This carnival featured events sponsored by Colgate, such as snow sculpture competitions or ski races. However, they also featured events such as cocktail parties and fraternity parties. And also, this carnival kind of serves as a precursor for Colgate's present-day spring party weekend. So on the left, thank you. So on the left is sort of our representation of present-day dangers of binge drinking culture and how that contributes to gendered violence.
Sorry. So the positions of the people, we clearly have one person taking up a lot of space, and another one who's kind of just confined to the arm of the couch. And this sort of like represents like a power imbalance between the two people, and especially the person who's been drinking a lot clearly, and the person who hasn't been drinking too much.
Okay, so this is the fourth system that we looked at. The picture here on the left shows Helen Craven Muse again with a couple of what they describe as her peers. But this caption was particularly concerning. Basically, it said that her male peers were walking with her thinking that she is a swell girl, I think was the wording, with really no other explanation. Just going to show the existence of gender violence at the time. But then we connected it to the system of rape culture with our own interpretation here on the right. There are a few obvious things that we are intending to do, obviously, with the tape over Kelsey's mouth, trying to show the way that the system might silence her, make her feel uncomfortable to speak out. Dash and I standing above Kelsey with kind of smirking like expressions to kind of show a power imbalance and to show just a system where we're standing over her, essentially. Yeah, that's that picture for enough. Yeah.
So, relation to the feminist project, first, feminism as a doing project. We used our own bodies in the photographs to represent the systems here at Colgate that contribute to gendered violence. We also engaged in active reflection through portraying these systems by using our bodies and like acting as sort of participants in these photographs and thinking deeply about the meaning of these photographs and what they represent in regards to systems contributing to gendered violence. Finally, we questioned our own participation in these Colgate systems as students here at Colgate and how we involuntarily play a part in these positions in these systems that still contribute to gendered violence even this day.
So in terms of assumptions and findings, I think we assumed that we assumed a focus on rape culture, and we actually did the majority of our research on rape culture going into it. But based upon our survey, we wanted to explore some of the other outcomes because we got such a variety of results, not only of where students were seeing gendered violence take place, but the forms and the forms they were seeing it take and like the sources of it. So we wanted to explore those through the varying photos, and I think we were struck by also the misrepresentation of the female history when we explored in the archives, particularly Helen Craven Muse's story, which to this day is being passed off as like sort of a happy sort of seminal moment in Colgate's history, even on like the 200 website. But to this day is still kind of a gendered and one-dimensional view of it. So yeah, in this project, I think we definitely came away with a lot better of an understanding of the different forms of gendered violence and how the school views it.
That is all.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions now for all four groups. And so, yeah, and we have some opening questions for the groups just to kind of refresh your memories. But we could start with the most recent group just because that's the most. Yes.
Should we just jump in with questions?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So thank you all for doing this.
I teach Intro to Women's Studies as well, so I'm really interested in how you all have developed your structural lens in thinking about racism and heterocentrism and rape culture. And my question for all the groups actually is taking up this idea of doing feminism. So maybe there's one person in each group who can answer this or may want to answer this. 1 year from now, how is this project going to inform the ways in which you're doing feminism in your life?
At least for me, looking at music, like there were a lot of songs I looked at that I didn't assume had like a negative like background, and it's just like upbeat songs. And like after researching them, I like noticed that a lot more songs have like deeper meanings that aren't always positive. So going like forward, like actually looking at the songs and the artists and what they stand for, and like listening to artists I like support, and not listening to artists that send like negative messages.
For our group, I know I sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but just the idea of being super cognizant about your language, and I hope like in a year from now, I personally have improved on that, but not only that, I also like to the people around me can share it and hopefully just have that continue to grow.
Yeah, awesome thoughts.
I think for us, the biggest part was kind of the emphasis on doing something with your body. So especially in the wake of some upsetting things that are happening on campus, actually doing something about it and moving your body to go kind of support someone or reach out. Our group kind of embodied that. After the whiteboard incident, we like went and put sticky notes and just like the act of walking over there and kind of moving yourself to involve yourself in that.
Okay. Any other just general questions for all of the groups? Anything at all?
Thank you. I am a visiting professor for Spring 2020, so this is my first time at Colgate, and it was fascinating to see that your feminist doing project is something as ordinary but still significant as almost critical consumption, like the way that you consume education or consume music or even consume the history of the institution that Colgate gives to you. You were very critical about that, but also exposed something that we just regularly take for granted. It was also fascinating to see the first female, as I'm walking on this place, this is where she first walked. So it was interesting to live in that legacy that you just showed. And I think it will be something so fascinating to even give to first-time professors here at Colgate. I'm from UCT, so I keep saying UCT. But it would be interesting to just see that our orientation into this university should come from students, not from other faculty, really. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, then we have a few like opening questions for the groups. Do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah. So for the most recent group, I was just wondering if there was a photo that you all felt, just how taking these photos, whether it was in terms of like discomfort you may have felt, how these bettered or like furthered your understanding of gendered violence on campus.
I mean, I can speak on part for this. I think definitely it did like further like my understanding of gendered violence. If you saw like for the Greek life photo, where like me as a subject, like I'm kind of like walking upstairs with Ben and Dash kind of just looking down at me like menacingly. And like while we were like posing for the photo, like it wasn't real. Like for the 2 seconds that you really need to act the part and make the face, like it does feel real in a way, and it does really kind of give you that eerie feeling that I feel like unfortunately a lot of girls on this campus have to experience.
Thank you so much. All right, just kind of a general question for all of you. You all did a really great job of creatively expressing how you are completing the feminist project and how your project in itself is contributing towards it. So I was just wondering how and why you all picked the ways that you did to present
up here with like the skits and the radio show and the pictures and things like that, like why you chose that way.
So I think in doing the radio show, something that was really cool and also connected to furthering the feminist project is that we did it live on air. So there could have been like a ton of, I doubt it, but like there could have been like a ton of people actually listening to our show. And hopefully we educated people just like even outside of this brown bag and in our class. So I think that was really cool and a really interesting way that we use our medium to further the project.
We chose to do a skit to kind of show like a real life-like example of how a classroom might play out. I think it's a lot different, like reading an article or reading a page about the type of language that should be used and actually hearing it and seeing some of the responses that some students might have and how the teacher should react. Yeah, we touched on this a little bit during our project, but we did the Instagram page because it was kind of like this public platform that a lot of people, we kept it public so people could write comments and like create a dialogue. And also the fact that Instagram is like a big platform that objectifies people's bodies. So using that to kind of show this injustice was what we had in mind.
Did you all want to speak on what's this one?
Yeah, we kind of touched on this earlier, but just trying to do something physically with our bodies to just to embody what the feminist project is really supposed to be about was really the thing that led us the images. Just as something that makes sense as a response and a contrast to the images we were looking at in Colgate's history.
I also think part of it was photos like going across time. Like you can have like a tangible thing that you can kind of look at and analyze from a time that was really different from ours.
Thank you guys. Super creative. It was really fun to watch that. Now kind of opening up to the audience. Do any of you have any other questions for like specific groups or all the groups in general?
So I really appreciated all of your presentations. They're fabulous. I have a question. I really also appreciated how much you work to decenter dominant identities and all of your work. And I wonder how did that influence the way that you move in other spaces? Now, I'm not talking other classrooms, but in terms of your social spaces, your friend spaces, and things like that.
Does anyone want to speak on that?
Well, in our project and in like the sex education project, a lot of it centered on language and what like words we use to describe people and places. And so I think, especially after women's studies this semester, just being so cognizant of what terms we choose to apply to spaces and people's bodies, like that really affects the way that I move through places now.
One thing I got from ours was like the fact that two different bodies could kind of do the same thing but get completely different reactions. So just kind of keeping that in mind and like acknowledging what bodies have power and like what reactions that they get and how that differs from other bodies that might not have the same privilege.
Yeah, it's definitely a project.
For us, I know that personally working with photos in this project is going to force me to think about just viewing in general and seeing in general and thinking more critically about what I'm looking at. Because analyzing a photo is one thing, but you can really use a lot of those show mnemonics to think about how you're viewing scenes or how you could be viewing a situation. And taking a little time to think more critically about how something's being presented, how you might see it, as opposed to how others see it, I think is a really valuable tool that could do a lot of good. So yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the pictures often looked pretty innocent and until they read the caption and then it changed the context of the picture completely for me. So.
Oh yeah, and for my project, I think it made me realize the importance of accountability, especially on a campus like Colgate, because I feel like we move through spaces every day, and there's this elephant in the room all the time that often never goes addressed. So I think like by doing this research, by doing this project, I realized like you need to hold like your peers accountable. You need to hold adults, because we are all adults, are accountable for like whether it's in the form of like microaggressions or explicit things, because oftentimes like we let it go and then it manifests into like a big thing, like which we saw earlier this year, and then there's outrage for a short period of time and then it dies down again. So yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of ideas about individual activism, which sounds great. But as I was listening to all your presentations, I was thinking about institutional activism and what we can do to make Colgate better and more just. And so thinking about the radio station, thinking about even this space, thinking about the archives, sex ed, like institutionally, what would you want to fight for now?
Good question.
I think one thing that came up for us that I think is at least a baseline is just transparency. Just the way that the Helen Craven Muse story was framed, for an example, seemed to be a way of hiding a dark shadow of a history in the form of something light, something positive, when it was quite blatant that that really wasn't the case in terms of how long it took and even just the process of integration. So I think just more broadly, just expecting transparency and openness from Colgate as an institution kind of has to be the first step in making progress.
Well, kind of going off that too, I think that there's like on an institutional level, but also like on a campus-wide level, there are opportunities like for there are groups and organizations and opportunities to participate in things that can spur that kind of change. But I think it's like whether or not you as an individual choose to participate in that. And I think that it's like important to, I guess, even though this is kind of an individual, but I think it's like if we as individuals push ourselves to see bigger than like our own identities and our own issues and participate in areas that go beyond our own identities, I think is kind of what can help bring issues to an institutional level and awareness to those issues on a grander scheme than just like the people that it directly affects, and can help like bring different perspective and voices to the things that need change on this campus.
So just think on an institutional level, getting rid of systems that support the gender binary like Greek life would be a solution, and something that like institutionally should be enacted upon. Thank you. Anyone else? We have time for like one more question.
I have a question for the coasters. The presentation about the whatever that word is. Thank you. Black women. So I've had debates with people about this topic. So how, for the next time I do debate about it, how would you argue against the argument that white women who take on Black women's features, the argument that they're embracing their culture, how would you argue against that?
I think it kind of goes back to the fact that when white women do it, it's seen as like more that when it's on a black body, it's objectified, and when it's on a white body, it's not, and how white people have been commodifying it and benefiting from it when Black people aren't, and like that contrast. Thank you.
I think there's also a very distinct difference between appreciation and exploitation. And then, like for the case with the Blackfishers, for example, like you see these women who are profiting off of like this racially ambiguous aesthetic, and they're getting these sponsorship deals and job opportunities, whereas actual Black women are not. So I think for you, like all you have to do is throw out the facts. Like look at who's showing up in commercials. Look at who are sponsors for certain brands. Like, and then also say like, do you think that tan that she has is real? Like, she's not anything other than white. It's the same thing like with the Kylie Jenner thing. Like her tan you could wipe off with a wet wipe. So like, yeah. So really, it's just acknowledging like who is present in certain spaces and who is not.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, I think a good chat. Let's go to the room second time.
Thank you all for attending and great job to the groups.
Before everyone leaves, we just really quickly wanted to make a thank you to Professor Hill for pushing us in these directions this whole semester, and to all the groups that didn't present, you guys did some great work. Thank you everybody for coming.
What? We're not done. We have a portfolio. Yeah. It's not like it feels good. What? No, I like it. I like it. I've never seen it. Oh, I like it. I like it now. When you you're so strong. Thank you for the donuts.
Okay.
We're almost trying sad. It's your season.
It's cold. Oh no, I